At Eastern Bank, we believe that growing business should also grow the community. That's why we work to give all business owners what they need to take their dreams to the next level. Our dedication to small businesses and communities has inspired us to create the Equity Alliance for Business program and become the #1 SBA lender in Massachusetts for 15 years running. We're proud to be here for all businesses, big and small. See the good we can do for you by visiting easternbank.com/business.
This is what it sounds like.
Member FDIC.
Are you looking for ideas to make your life happier, healthier, more productive, and more creative? Listen to Happier with Gretchen Rubin, a weekly podcast hosted by two sisters. I'm Gretchen Rubin, the #1 best-selling author of The Happiness Project.
And I'm Elizabeth Kraft, a Hollywood showrunner. Each week we share fresh insights and practical solutions, such as follow the 1-minute rule, choose a one-word theme for the year, or design your summer.
Listen and follow the podcast Happier with Gretchen Rubin.
Welcome to Say More from Boston Globe Opinion. I'm Shirley Leung. One of the best things about being a journalist is leaving the office to visit people in their worlds.
So we're here in Fort Point at BLO's headquarters, checking out our
Nina
rehearsal
Yoshida
space.
Nelson is the new artistic director of the Boston Lyric Opera. Last week, I went to their creative studios in Boston's Fort Point Channel neighborhood.
Yeah, come this way. Let's go check it out.
The studios used to be some kind of industrial space, probably related to shipping. Now a fancy HVAC system snakes between offices and practice rooms.
In opera, we have, 3 weeks of rehearsal before we even move to a theater. So having space like this accommodates us being able to bring artists to rehearse and to...
There's one big open room.
Oh, wow. Look how cool this is.
Wooden floors, high ceilings, and a long brick wall. The soundscape in here is just different.
And as an opera singer, you walk into a space and the first thing you do is you look at the surfaces, right? If you see everything that's like a fabric wall and a carpeted floor, you know that right away, like the acoustics are not going to be good to sing in because all of that fabric sucks up the sound. Whereas if you see, hard surfaces, you can hear that there's already an echo and there's, and so that in some ways just makes it so much easier because you
Even when she was just talking, I could sense Nina's powerful mezzo-soprano voice. We went into a back room to chat. Nina might be an opera singer, but there's nothing old-fashioned about her. To her, opera is not a dead art. Its future is bright. But moving into that future can be hard. In many industries, we've been reckoning with race and historic injustice. Nina said opera is no different.
Our industry was shut down for COVID, and we had the whole industry unable to work for close to 2 years. And so as we were all shut down, one of the things that opera came to terms with was diversity, equity, inclusion, as the rest of the nation was as well. And so that, along with the following year, the shooting of Asian women in Atlanta, was what started to inspire me in my work as an Asian American advocate for diversity in the opera industry. And as I started to look around me, I realized, and I'm not that old, but I was one of the oldest Asian American opera singers in the United States. And I started to say, well, maybe it's my turn to start speaking out as well. And I looked at my own career, and in 10 years, I had sung close to 200 performances of Madame Butterfly. I'd sung in lots of different operas that tell Asian American stories. But in 10 years, I had sung 3 non-Asian roles. And to me, when I did that math, I was shocked. And I was like, if I'm shocked, how will anyone else in our industry know? Because we're self-employed, right? So we go from company to company to company. And I said, well, if I didn't know, how will anyone else?
So you mentioned the shootings in Atlanta, and I think for a lot of Asian Americans, March 16th, 2021 is seared in our minds. I mean, I talk about it's our George Floyd moment for those of us of a certain generation. I think we're a similar generation. And murders of 8 people, including 6 Asian American women, by a lone gunman outside of an Asian spas in Atlanta. And I'm not sure if you had this experience, but I remember seeing the victims, photos of the victims, and realizing they look like they could have been my mother, my aunts, my friends, and it just stopped me in my tracks. And I was just wondering what went through your mind when you heard about and read about the Atlanta shootings.
Yeah, I agree in that, for a long time growing up in Southern California, I lived a very privileged life of being around diverse groups of people and maybe not even necessarily identifying as Asian American. It was just part of, I'm 4th generation Japanese American. So by the time that, I came around, my family has been very Americanized.
Right.
And so part of what I talk about a lot is that I started identifying more with my Japanese heritage as the opera industry started identifying me as a Japanese American, and I was put into certain roles doing certain things. And I was like, oh, and it was, in some ways, it's been a blessing for me. But you're absolutely right. The second that it's there in front of all of us, it becomes who's next. And especially as someone who works with many other Asian and Asian Americans, it's really scary. And I started looking around, being in different cities and wondering if I should step a little further away from the train platform, from the edge of the train platform.
I've done that too.
And I don't know. We can't live our lives scared, but awareness is important.
So I want to go back to you playing Asian American roles. I think Suzuki, right, in Madame Butterfly is it mezzo soprano role?
Yes.
Tell me about that role, and again, remind me, how many times have you played that?
Yeah,
played her?
Yeah, almost 200. And like I said earlier, I because I'm 4th generation Japanese American, I knew very little about being Japanese. And I had never worn a kimono until I was put into this opera. I didn't know about, how to open shoji screens or how to, or tea, or a lot of the Japanese cultural things that are sort of sometimes performed on the stage. But all of a sudden I was like, oh, I better learn about my culture and my heritage.
This was a modern Japan. This is turn of the century Japan, right?
Yes, exactly.
So when I learned more about Madame Butterfly, it was a very cringy storyline. You have this American soldier looking for a geisha, a 15-year-old Japanese woman to marry, but knowing that wouldn't be his forever wife, that his whole plan along was to marry an American wife, a real American wife. Yes. And it's the whole thing is tragic. I mean, Madame Butterfly gets pregnant, right, has a son, and then the soldier's gone off somewhere, I don't know, fight another war, comes back with his American wife, his white wife, and Madame Butterfly then commits suicide. She in front of him, and this is all sung in Italian, right? And so I was thinking, oh man, this is so cringy. I don't know if I want to watch this.
Right. Well, I think that that's part of the reckoning that we're having as an opera industry in general. And something that I talk about a lot is, yes, she was a 15-year-old woman, but there was, if you look at, the late 1800s, the idea of a 15-year-old girl is very different than
that's true. That's right.
Our
That's
modern,
a perfect marrying age.
Right. So where it is very cringy now, it wasn't as cringy, 130 years ago. But that being said, we want our audiences currently to feel comfortable and
Yeah.
not to squirm in their
Right.
seats. And every single time you hear Madame Butterfly say, "Oh, guess how old I am?" And the first guess is, "Oh, I'm 10 years old." And she goes, No, much higher. And then
Right.
he says, "Well, you're 20. She said, No, much lower.
Yeah.
I'm 15, but I'm already very old."
Yeah.
That's her response, right? And you lose the audience's buy-in and their trust in the story when you hear that. When you a contemporary audience hears that.
Right.
And so that was part of what we were talking about at Boston Lyric Opera when we were talking about how do we put a production on stage that is not potentially harming our community members. What does it mean to objectify an Asian woman?
Yeah.
What does it mean watching an Asian woman kill herself on stage? And how does that resonate within the community? And that was, BLO was wonderful in taking a step back and looking at who we are in Boston and realizing that this was not the way that Madame Butterfly should be presented. However, the flip side is Madame Butterfly is one of the highest selling operas around the world. It's a way to sell tickets and to get people in. So BLL, we spent a whole year of time and resources dedicated to looking at and talking about publicly about some of the problems that occur when producing Madame Butterfly. We talked about the history of performance practice. We talked about Orientalism, how Orientalism came to be, why it was important at the time. We talked about casting and pigeonholing. We talked about objectification of Asian women. And we had all these conversations publicly. And we knew that part of what we were doing was creating a resource for the rest of the industry so that anytime anyone produces Madame Butterfly, they can come to our resources that we collected over this year, which most companies don't have the time, money, commitment to really dig in that deep.
So talk about, I think it's set in San Francisco's Chinatown in the 1940s. So how did you improve Madame Butterfly?
Right. It is. It's set in Chinatown in the 1940s, and it's on basically on the eve of Pearl Harbor. And we're looking at a different Asian story, Asian American story. I always say it's an Asian American story based in history rather than an Orientalist fantasy.
Yep.
So we looked at the libretto, and we know already that Puccini made the version that we see is Puccini's fifth iteration of Madame Butterfly. And so we started to ask ourselves the question of, would he want his opera canceled, or would he want it to evolve with the times, as he had already evolved it 5 times, making sure that it was successful when it premiered? And we took the route of, we think that he would want this story to be told, his music to live on. And that was when one of the things we learned in our year-long process was people loved the love story and loved the music. And those were the things that our audiences felt very strongly about. So we kept the music exactly as it was. There was not a single change to the music. And there was a love story that we told. It was a love story, yes, between Pinkerton and Butterfly, but more importantly, it was a love story between a mother and her son. And just flipping the way that we were viewing things, the lens through which we were viewing, already a lot of problems were solved.
Yeah.
And then we went through the libretto and we looked at, do we really want a 15-year-old girl? And so we changed it and we flipped it, and we didn't ask her how old she was. We asked him, how old are you? And he said, I'm 21. I'm the age to go to war.
I see.
And we changed little things in the libretto, like instead of Nagasaki, 4 syllables, we said San Francisco, also 4 syllables.
Right.
And Act 1 took place in Chinatown in San Francisco, and Act 2 and Act 3 took place in Japanese American incarceration camps.
Oh, wow.
So, yes, Pinkerton went off to war.
Yeah.
and Butterfly and Suzuki were sent to camp. In our version, Pinkerton knew that she was pregnant and knew that she was going to have a child, and so he was always potentially going to come back for her. Another flip of the way we were thinking about things is from the very beginning of Act 2, we established that this child was sick, and there was not enough medical care in the camps to heal him. And Butterfly was waiting for Pinkerton to come home for war because she needed to save her son. And she just kept holding on to this hope that he is going to be here because her love of her son, she needed to save her son. And so, again, just a little flip of the way we're looking at things.
Yeah. You played Suzuki in the Atlanta Opera in 2022. I have audio here. Set up this clip for us.
Okay, this is probably one of the most iconic moments in Madame Butterfly. It's the flower duet. And it's when Butterfly and Suzuki have learned that Pinkerton is returning home, and we sing about making the home beautiful with flowers. And usually in most productions, you have petals that fall from the sky, and it's just one of the most magical moments. And so I think most audience members sit there waiting for this time. People who know Butterfly, this is one of the times that they wait for in the opera, so they can sit back and relax and enjoy this beautiful music and the visuals that come to them as they're listening. One of my favorite things about this particular point in the opera is the amount of joy that I get to portray. Oftentimes in a tragedy, you're constantly, frowning or crying or upset. But in this moment, there is nothing but joy. And I love that.
We know that even though that's given you a lot of work, you do feel pigeonholed, but you have played roles other than Suzuki. So I was wondering if you could set up another clip.
Yeah, one of my greatest joys is getting to tell Asian American stories. And this next clip is an aria from Huang Ro and David Henry Huang's American Soldier.
I had a dream, an American dream.
The story tells the true story of Private Danny Chen, who joined the Army to go to Afghanistan after 9/11. And he suffered such intense amount of hazing due to his identity as a Chinese American that it resulted in his death. And this aria is at the end of the opera, where I am singing a lullaby to my child who has died and telling him it's okay. I'll watch over you forever, and it's okay to go.
So you play Danny's mother?
I play Danny's mother. This clip is from a recording that I did in 2022, but actually I just last weekend finished playing this opera fully produced in New York City at a new theater. Real Life Danny was born and raised in Chinatown, New York, and so we got to bring his story home. And his mother was in the audience on opening night. His mom and dad were both there watching us tell his story. And it is one of the most meaningful, moving experiences of my career. Getting to tell stories of people and faces who normally are invisible, giving them visibility and having that honor of being there and telling the story of her son through her eyes.
More of my conversation with Nina Yoshida Nelson after this short break.
At Eastern Bank, we believe in good business. That's why we provide clients with a suite of products and services made to take their businesses to the next level. From express business loans to seamless cash management solutions, we make it easy to grow when the time is right. As a trusted full-service bank and the #1 SBA lender in Massachusetts for 15 years running, we understand what you need to keep your business thriving. See the good we can do for you by visiting easternbank.com/business.
This is what it sounds like.
Member FDIC.
How does an actress find the perfect accent for her character? How do members of an indie rock band figure out their harmonies? How does a crossword puzzle creator come up with clues? You'll find the answers to these questions and many more on Working, the podcast about how creative professionals get stuff done. Join me, June Thomas, and my co-hosts Isaac Butler and Ronald Young Jr. as we learn how writers outline novels, how composers get jobs and get paid, and how YouTube creators learn how to look into the camera lens. Listen to Working from Slate every Sunday wherever you listen.
So you became an opera singer by accident. You got to tell me that story.
Yeah, I was a violinist growing up, and I grew up in Southern California, and then came to Boston University to study violin. And I realized pretty soon into my studies as a violinist that I did not want to be a violinist for a profession, but I also loved psychology, and I thought, well, maybe what I'll do is I'll go and I will work with performers on performance anxiety.
Oh, yes.
And
that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
So as I got closer to grad school, that was my plan, is that I'm going to get a master's in psychology and work with performers. And got into a program. And at the same time, I had just started taking voice lessons. I had a woman from my community who had heard me sing in high school in a choir. And she said, I just want to give you $500 to take some voice lessons. And so at BU, I started taking voice lessons and with a grad student. And the voice teacher said, don't you want to maybe consider getting a master's in voice in opera? And I was like, well, no, opera's so over the top. I don't like opera. I don't like opera singers. And she convinced me, why don't you just apply at BU and see what happens? And so I applied to BU to get a master's in voice just because she was pushing me over and over and over again. And I got in, and I got a scholarship, much more money than I would have gotten towards psychology. I kept thinking about it. I was like, well, this could be fun. You know, I maybe it isn't as much as I thought it would be.
But okay, so singing opera, it's very specialized. Like I imagine like when you're in the shower, are you singing like an opera singer or are you singing like everyone else? Like how does that just come out of you?
I've always kind of sounded like an opera singer, which is why, you know, even when I was in high school or whatever.
So you only have one singing voice, opera.
Personally, I do. There are a lot of opera singers
so
who...
maybe I have that. I just haven't practiced used it, right?
Exactly. And, you know, my friends used to make fun of me that when I would sing karaoke or whatever, I would sound kind of like an opera singer. There are a lot of opera singers who do sing multiple genres.
Right.
I'm not one of those. I have always sounded like an opera singer. And so I said, well, I can always go back and do psychology later. I don't know if I can ever go back and do opera. And so I said, let's just give it a shot. And something that at the time felt so over the top and so dramatic.
Yes.
When I actually was in it and creating this work and this and this music, all of a sudden there was an outlet that I never felt like I had as a violinist. And my ability to create the music that I heard in my head that I could never do on the violin, I was able to do through my voice.
You also have starred in an opera called An American Dream, and talk about that character in that show.
Yeah, in 2018, 14, I got a call from Seattle Opera saying they were getting ready to workshop a new piece, and they needed an Asian American mezzo soprano. Would I be interested in flying to Seattle to come learn this piece, and so they could hear it sung, because at that point they'd only seen the music and did not know what it sounded like. So I went to Seattle for a week, and I learned a little bit more about this piece, An American Dream, and in it I realized that the story was about a Japanese American family who is incarcerated. And I called up my grandmother. My grandparents were incarcerated in Poston. And I called up my grandmother and I said, Grandma, I'm telling this Japanese American story. And in the Japanese American community, for those who were incarcerated, most people, most of the time, did not talk about their experiences. So I knew my grandparents had been incarcerated, but I didn't know many specifics other than the fact that they were taken from their homes and
This
sent
is
to a
during
camp.
World War II.
World War II, correct.
And because, we were fighting a war with Japan, they were grabbing Japanese Americans in the U.S.
From the West Coast. Over 120,000 Japanese Americans, 2/3 of whom were born and raised in the United States. The other third had no path to citizenship, so they weren't able to become American citizens, were taken from their homes and sent to desert prison camps, and they could only bring what they could carry with them, and they lost everything else. And so when I realized that this was the story that this opera was about, it opened up so much for me and my family's history. And throughout that week, I would call my grandma and I said, well, there's they talk about burning their things, that anything that might look Japanese school books or did you do that, Grandma? And she said, yes. We burned all sorts of stuff because we didn't want anything that had anything to do with Japan to be found when the police would come to our door. Well, Grandma, the father in this family, he's taken away by the FBI the day after Pearl Harbor. Did you have friends who were taken away? And my grandmother said, well, your grandfather's father was taken away. And I had never known that about my own family's history, that my great-grandfather was taken by the FBI the day after Pearl Harbor. Wow. And his family had no idea where he was taken. He was sent to South Dakota, and they didn't know where he was for 6 months.
Wow.
And so working on this opera started to open up so much of my own family's history, and it gave me reason to ask my grandmother about her experiences. Seattle Opera hired the librettist and the composer to write an aria for me.
Oh, wow. And
what they did was they went and they interviewed my grandmother. And from these interviews came the aria that my character sings. So my grandmother's been gone now for about 8 years. And I still, Seattle Opera was the first company to produce this opera, but there have been many since. And so anytime I get to sing this role, I tell a part of my grandmother's story and my family's story. And it's a gift that I get to keep giving, especially because so much of us are not taught about what happened during World War II to Japanese Americans. It's not taught in history classes, or if it is, it's just one little paragraph. Getting to tell the story is one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given.
So opera isn't exactly mainstream, right? It can be seen as a little old-fashioned. And so what do you think opera can do that no other art form can do?
Well, when we talk about opera, we talk about all art forms combined, right? You've got wigs, makeup, costumes, sets, voices, instruments, scenery, lighting. You talk about any type of art, and it's all on the stage with opera. And something that's incredibly special about opera is that, and a lot of people don't know, that we are not mic'd. We're not amplified. So
I only recently learned that.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
How is that possible? I mean, you are singing to a concert hall. You're singing above the orchestra.
Yes.
How is that possible?
Yeah. Acoustics and physics, and it's amazing. These two little vocal cords that are in our throats
Wow.
will be heard at 5,000 seat auditorium without a microphone, over a full orchestra, over a chorus of 100 people, my little voice can be
Maybe you need
heard.
to lead with that.
Right. Exactly. I think that's
Maybe that will get the kids to watch it.
Absolutely. And I think that's fascinating.
Yes.
Is that like literally this little thing in my throat is powerful enough to be heard, for thousands of people.
Right. So what excites you about the future of opera?
I think what excites me about the future of opera is telling stories that matter in our community, that people want to come and see. Mm-hmm. We're not a museum art form. Mm-hmm. We are a living, breathing art form. No matter if you see Madame Butterfly here this year and then see it next year, it's going to be completely different because we are living and breathing, and we have the power to tell stories that matter, stories that are impactful. One of the greatest things about opera, because it is unamplified and because we're not only telling stories like you would see in the theater in a play, we also have the ability to express emotions. It's almost primal, like we're screaming, right? We express emotions through our voices in ways that no other art form can express. And I think part of it comes with education. And how are we educating children about appreciation of the arts, and how do we grow the arts, and how do we make sure that there are audiences that are coming in the future? And then also, how are we making it accessible, right? What is the accessibility like? So I think that those are questions that are on my mind all the time. And because I know and I love opera so much, and I know how relevant it is and can be, but how do we make sure that other people also learn that? And that's something that, here at BLO, we're constantly thinking about. What is this community, and how can we bring more people into our community, and how can we serve our community better?
Well, Nina, I think you are definitely making opera more accessible. And thank you for letting us into your studios here, the BLO studios here in South Boston. Nina Yoshida Nelson is the new artistic director of the Boston Lyric Opera. Thank you for being on Say More.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Today's episode was produced by Anna Kusmer. Our editor is Jim Dow. Our engineer is Uzair Ahmed. Our music is from APM Music. If you like the show, please follow us and leave us a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can email us at saymore@globe.com. For a list of arias heard today, check out the show notes. I'm Shirley Leung. Thanks for listening.
Life doesn't come with an instruction manual, but the Life Kit podcast gets you pretty close. Whether we're helping you tackle life-altering questions or just your everyday pickles, we've got deeply human solutions to your deeply human problems. Listen now to the Life Kit podcast from NPR.
In a divided world, the one thing everyone seems to agree on is that the media is some kind of conspiracy.
And here's the thing. Media is a conspiracy, just not the one everyone thinks it is.
I'm Naima Raza.
I'm Ben Smith.
And this is Mixed Signals from Semaphore Media. Every Friday between now and November, we're going to pull back the curtain on the stories everyone is talking about.
Exploring how money, politics, culture, and access shape everything you read, watch, and listen to.
Mixed Signals, a look inside modern media from people inside the machine.
Listen on Spotify. Listen on Spotify. Listen on Spotify. Listen on Spotify.